Good morning, everyone. I hope you're all doing well. Happy Wednesday. We're going to wait just a few minutes while folks are streaming into today's webinar. So feel free to log in, get comfortable, grab some water. We'll get started in just a moment. Again, welcome to those that have just joined us. Good morning. Happy Wednesday. We're going to get started in just a couple of minutes. We're letting folks get into the room and get settled. So feel free to just take a moment for yourself. And if you'd like, please feel free to go ahead and introduce yourself in the chat. You can give your name, your location, where you're calling in from, and which organization or institution you're with. We would love to see who's in the room. Hey, Alex. Way to kick it off. Thank you. Good morning, Brett. Just down the road. Good to have you with us. Hey, Kirsten. Excellent. All right, we're going to wait just one more minute for folks to come in. For those that have just joined us, good morning. Thank you for being with us today. Folks are starting to introduce themselves in the chat, so please feel free to share your name and your institution, where you're calling in from. It's great to see folks from all over, and certainly, of course, lots from California. So we're excited to see all of our neighbors. Terrific. All right, with that, let me just jump into some of our housekeeping before we get into our panel discussion. So as you can see, we have some wonderful guests on the screen today. We're going to have a really great and robust conversation around what employers are looking for when they think about community college talent and hiring community college students. We also have really wonderful representation from community college. So Maloney is going to tell us a little bit more about sort of what she's seeing on the ground, what's working, what's not working, and what recommendations she has as well for colleagues and peers. Now, what you'll see here is that we are obviously in a Zoom webinar format. Many of you are likely very familiar with this already. There is a Q&A button down at the bottom bar. If you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A section. It'll make it easier for my team on the back end to be able to capture your questions and aggregate them for me for the end of our panel presentation today. Sometimes there's such rich conversation going on in the chat that we can miss questions when they're in the chat. So if you have an actual question, please put it into the Q&A, but please feel free to use the chat to sort of comment on things that might resonate that the panelists say, or things along those lines. And you don't have to wait. You can start putting questions in as the panelists are speaking as well. And we know that a common question is often whether or not this will be recorded. We are recording as we speak right now, and we will send that out to you. So if you have any colleagues that could not make it today, you will be able to share the recording with them. Okay, now today's outline is fairly simple. We're obviously doing an introduction right now. We're going to talk first with the panelists around hiring community college students and what does that sort of look like. We then want to shift into the impact of diversity, equity, and inclusion. DEI is such a hot topic for everyone from higher education to employers. We want to talk about what does that really mean and what is the impact of that on recruiting, on retention, and on our students. And then lastly, we want to talk about elevating community colleges in the recruiting landscape. We know that these students bring so much value. They have such great experience, and how do we continue to elevate their presence and their ability to be found by really great employers? And then lastly, we'll have some Q&A from the audience as well. So looking forward to a great conversation. Next, I want you to meet our wonderful speakers. First up is Robin. Robin, good morning. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning. How are you?
Doing well. Robin is joining us with HCL, and she's going to be sharing a bit of her experience and what she is looking for in just a little bit. Second up,
Glad to be here.
So excited to have you. Lydia, great to see you. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
Doing well, doing well. Lydia is with MAA and very excited to have her as well. She's the other employer representative today, and we're also going to hear her experience and the things that she's looking for on her team. Lastly, we have Maloney, last but not least, from Foothill College. Those of you that have joined us for previous webinars have certainly seen Maloney before. She is one of our fan favorites, and so glad to have her back again. She works in workforce development, so it's going to be wonderful to be able to hear from her some of the work that she's been doing on the ground at Foothill. Maloney, great to have you.
Thank you, Christine. Good morning, everyone.
Wonderful. And for those of you that don't know me, my name is Christine Cruz Vergara. I'm the Chief Education Strategy Officer here at Handshake, and I'm excited to moderate today's conversation. So with that, let's go ahead and jump right in. For those of you that are a little bit newer to Handshake, our mission has remained actually the same since our founding 7 years ago. It is to help every student find a great job and to be able to build the foundation of a really meaningful career, regardless of who they are, where they come from, or who they know. And I think as a daughter, quite frankly, of two immigrants and a first-gen college student myself, one of the things that I feel so passionately about is that where you come from doesn't necessarily have to define where you go. And there are opportunities for us to be able to help our students change the trajectory of their lives, not only for themselves, but for their families. And so Handshake is the largest early career network. We partner with over 1,300 universities and colleges now, many of which are community colleges. We just started that just last year. Maloney is actually one of our early partners from the community college space. We work with over 9 million active job seekers, students and young alumni, to help connect them to the 550,000 employers that are on our network. And so we're very excited to be able to democratize opportunity and to make it easier for students who otherwise would not have been able to get access to some of these amazing employers and opportunities, make it easier and simpler for them to be able to not only have access, but to be able to take advantage of those relationships and those opportunities as they think about their future as well. So with that, let's go ahead and jump right into the conversation today. Lydia and Robin, let's actually start with you. So let's kind of get right into the meat of this conversation. I would love, Lydia, why don't you start, and Robin, you can go right after. Put the audience in your shoes. Tell us a little bit about what's top of mind for you today when you think about campus recruiting on a community college. What are the goals that you're trying to achieve? What are the challenges that you're facing?
Sure. So I think, everyone in recruiting right now is experiencing some of the same challenges where it's a very tight labor market. So some of the things that we are focusing on is identifying students and candidates early in their college career so that we can be an employer of choice upon their graduation or whenever they are ready to start work. So in our partnerships with community colleges, we're just really looking for unique and creative ways that will allow us to be at the top of mind for those students upon graduation.
Terrific. Robin, how about you?
I think the discussion is similar. And so we've begun to strategize about that. How do we capture that audience? We're in the information technology industry. And so tech moves extremely quickly, right? And you have to just jump on board and hang on for the ride. So we've recently created some apprenticeship programs. So we're actually starting to talk to, believe it or not, 8th and 9th graders, and then engaging with them through that process, and then creating some really exciting programs for them so that we can capture them hopefully when they're in their community college and working on their associate's degree. We can build programs for them so that we can be their employer of choice also.
That's great. I'm going to actually pose a question to the audience. If you don't mind putting in the chat, based on what you're hearing from your students, what does work in terms of what employers can do to really be top of mind for your students? Do your students want to see something? Do they want to hear something? Do they want to know more about the benefits? Is there something that an employer can do that really makes them stand out and be top of mind for your students? I think Lydia and Robin would both appreciate hearing any and all thoughts that you might have. So please feel free to fill the chat up with any ideas and things that you're hearing. Now, for Lydia and Robin, let's actually kind of dig into this a little bit deeper. I'm really curious, and Robin, let's start with you this time. What do you see from candidates that really makes you look twice? When a candidate does X, you're more likely to move them into the interview pile. or you're more likely to move them from interview to offer. Give our Career Center folks a sense of how can they really prep their students so that they're doing some of these behaviors or actions that you love.
So for us, tech skills can be trained, right? We're dealing with this untapped potential, and those are skills that you can train on. What is difficult to train on is those interpersonal skills. So our individuals are going into full-time roles, and ultimately we want them to be client facing. And what I always tell students is that that's a skill set that will really be a resume changer for them, and it will impact them significantly financially as well. So we want them to showcase their personalities, and we've even met with some of our campuses and had them as a part of their curriculum to build in some presentation skills. And that's been really, really helpful. And helping to sort of bring that out. We get not all tech folks are comfortable in that space, but if they are with us, it really is a resume changer.
Terrific, super helpful. Lydia, how about you? Anything that stands out to you?
Sure. I think, in our space, MAA, we are a property management company, so we're often seeking students and candidates who have a background in HVAC, electrical, plumbing. I think that something that stands out to us is, again, just in this super competitive space with those students who are coming up on graduation, kind of advising them and teaching them how to seek a career and not just necessarily a dollar amount, because it can be a very lucrative industry right now due to the competition. MAA is the largest owner operator of apartments in the US, so we're not always the leader in terms of that hourly rate, but we have amazing benefits, a very clear career path. So I think any kind of training, and additional insight provided to the students on like, hey, this person might be offering $1 more an hour, but this company has better benefits. Like, what are you ultimately seeking out of this next step? Is it a job or is it a career?
That's super helpful. Now, given everything that you've just said, that both of you have shared, what strategies or tools are you actually using to sort of navigate those challenges and or goals? Lydia, do you want to start?
Sure, absolutely. So, we do have, we have a really structured interview process. So I think that another thing, and kind of speaking in preparing students and candidates for that process, we do have quite a structured interview process where they do go through multiple rounds, and we really try to dig into what they're looking for. I think another thing that students can ask about is, hey, what does this company's training program look like? Even if they did just go through a 2 to 3 year program, if they don't have that work experience yet, they need to make sure that they're choosing a company and a career that can continue to provide them training and build on what they've already learned at that community college or tech school.
Terrific, super helpful. Robin, how about you? Anything else?
So we're similar. I told you a little bit before that we've developed a program for apprentices. So I think that that's going to be a really great strategy for us. And we were hiring significant numbers into our internships and full-time, and we have the goals to hire the same into apprenticeships. And then, of course, our internships. So that's building our pipeline and engaging with students. And then we want to build kind of lifelong learners. We recognize that this early career talent, if you don't engage them and keep them learning, that they will move. One of the things I love about this audience is that, compensation is important, but just important to them is just as important as culture and continued learning. So we have to really think about that audience and what's important to them and what's going to keep them engaged. And so continued learning, career pathing, benefits are important, but also to this audience, they may not even understand what those benefits are. They may not understand how a 401k can, benefit them long-term. So investing in them and education about how it's a real advantage. Tuition reimbursement has been a really big game changer for us too.
I was just going to say, everything you've talked about is really investing in the person. You're investing in your people and recognizing that they're a huge asset, obviously to HCL, but even in their future and what that could look like, whether it's advancing within your organization or eventually moving out into something else, you're sort of setting them up with a really strong foundation.
Yeah, investment is a word that I use a lot.
That's fantastic. That's wonderful. Now, Maloney, let's kind of switch over to you. When you think about hiring community college students, you of course not only do research in this space and you teach about the world of work, but you're on the ground directly interacting with employers and with students. What are some of the trends that you are seeing? And it could be at Foothill or broader in the community college space.
I think one of the trends that the pandemic kind of helped us with is actually getting community college students more visible because everyone was shifting to a virtual space. It made our use of Handshake really critical in terms of how our students were getting access, not just to opportunities that were in our community, which was kind of the traditional model, but literally anywhere around the world, right? And so that's been really helpful in shifting mindset overall as a broader shift in trend building, because now our students, even if you're coming from a community college or you're at a community college where most of the time in the past, students would go to the college where they then wanted to find a career in that area, right? Because you had all the linkages, you had the partnerships. But now, just because you're geographically going to a college in one place doesn't eliminate where you might be wanting to look for your career opportunity afterward, whether you transfer to a four-year or not. So that's something really important, the acceptance of the idea of more geographic mobility from our students. And also our students are coming to us from a variety of regions. So before we were really kind of, I don't want to say struggling, but students had to kind of come to us, right? But now we have so much of a larger online footprint that our students are coming from everywhere. And the fact that we have these tools that allow us to then provide career opportunities and pathways to having a career no matter where you started is really critical. And I think the buy-in for that before was a little bit on the lower side, but now everyone really is buying into the idea of global labor mobility. And I think that's really cool that Handshake is also kind of following the data for that. By the use of the platform, we're able to see where our students are going and what they're getting out of it. So that's my large trend. And then on a smaller scale, I think students are also more willing to kind of think outside of their traditional career paths or roles, because we've all really been adding a number of non-major training opportunities. So traditionally speaking, students were looking at the major as the goal that they needed to achieve to get to a career. But now the boot camps, the certificates, the 1 quarter kind of intensive courses that will just like bump you to the next level for upskilling and reskilling and things like that. That's what a lot of students are coming for. And then employers have to find a way to connect with those students as well.
That's a really good point. Actually, I'm curious, Robin, from an HCL perspective, when you see a student that maybe is majoring in something that is indirectly related to some of the roles that you're hiring for, but perhaps has taken a credential or taken a course where they've gained some of the skills that you might need, does that make a difference? Are you willing to take a second look at that student? How does that factor in?
So you will notice on most of our positions, they'll need a STEM degree, an associate's, or they'll need a bachelor's degree in STEM. However, if they have a degree, let's say they have an associate's degree in something else and they're wanting to go back and get a second degree in STEM, they would be a great candidate for then our apprentice programs, because we can help them with that. And they'll have a tuition reimbursement and on-the-job training while they're completing that degree. That would be a great fit for someone. And we call that kind of reskilling. And so we've got a lot of back to work initiatives and reskilling for a great audience for that is veterans or dependents of veterans or spouses of veterans. We see a lot of that initiative for them wanting to change their focus. So yeah, we work with a lot of those.
Super helpful, super helpful. Lydia, how about you? How do you all view skills as you're thinking about recruiting and talent?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, this is just specific, to our industry. So typically when we're recruiting from community colleges or tech schools, we're focusing on, those trades and vocational areas. So electrical, plumbing, HVAC. Oftentimes we will get a lot of students from HVAC departments, because that's a huge portion of what they're doing when they are maintaining apartments. But very frequently, if someone has the mechanical aptitude to be studying electrical for the last 2 years, they can pretty well figure out an HVAC unit as well. So we absolutely look at that. And if someone shows that they have that mechanical interest or they have skills in other areas that are transferable, we would absolutely continue to consider that candidate for those opportunities.
That's fantastic. Maloney, I'm totally almost like taking a little pulse survey right now, but I'm curious from your perspective, one of the things that we want to make easier in Handshake actually is the opportunity for schools to be able to upload coursework for their students so that we can then translate that over to the employers and make it simpler for folks like Lydia and Robin to be able to just search in Handshake and find some of those skills. From your perspective, being at an institution, what's your appetite for uploading coursework and helping to make that easier for your students?
I think that would be amazing, because a lot of times at the moment when students put in courses, they're not necessarily describing them fully in a way that's helpful to them in the job market. So if from the Handshake side of things, you're able to translate what the students are putting in or the college is putting in a data dump so the students can then just pick from it. We have to have the piece of how that coursework is actually translatable to a career. And that's the part that sometimes is missing. So if that was there, and then a recruiter could know that at Foothill College, like business 5A has all of these skills, and a student who takes business 5A from this professor is just the kind of student we want. That would be another recruiting tool that would be super helpful at the community college, especially if someone does not complete a degree, but does take specific classes. So that we get a lot of as well.
I'm very excited. So as we continue to think about this, Maloney, I will be coming to you. We will talk more about what this could potentially look like. Now, I'm curious, Maloney, your bigger trend was about global mobility and the opportunity for students to not just have to stay in their local sort of area or region. I'm curious, over the course of this past year, have you actually seen a lot of movement from your students? Have they wanted to extend beyond sort of their local regional area and go to other parts of California or go to other states? What kind of movement are you actually seeing so far from your own students?
So we've actually had a lot of movement in both directions, right? We have had a lot of students who were not able to stay wherever they were at and had to come home and then find a way to continue their education. And then we've had the students who were just visiting us for their educational experience but had to leave. But yet we're still connected to our school in terms of curriculum and degree, and had to find a way to stay connected. And how are we going to then make all of our resources equitable to our new global mobile student population? So that was something that I don't think is going to change either after the pandemic ends, because now with the flexibility that everyone is used to, you can do so much more and experience so many more things without being tied to just one location, right? So in the eyes of our students, it's actually very freeing, especially if you have the ability to not pay for housing in a certain area, but still go to the school of your choice. You still need to be able to access all of what that school has to offer. So that's something that we're really working for. And Handshake has really helped in that sense in terms of our career related services that we can offer, because coming to a brick and mortar career center isn't an option when you're no longer, on campus.
Yeah, that's right. It's really interesting sort of what you say too about the fact that people have gotten used to having this level of flexibility. And so chances of it sort of reverting back to what it was before is unlikely. And this is a huge advantage. One of the things that I'm really struck by is most of my work experience has actually been at 4-year institutions. And I'm struck by how many 4-year institutions are really eager. The inertia is strong to try and actually kind of go back in person. Whereas I think more of our 2-year community colleges and technical colleges are sort of like, no, let's look forward and sort of figure out, how does this new normal, how do we figure this out? And how do we kind of continue pressing forward with some of those virtual and flexibility pieces? And it will be really fascinating, I think, over the next couple of years to see the differences that might emerge between our 2 years and our 4 years, and sort of what sticks in both of those circles, in both of those places. Maloney, I'm curious from your perspective, what's not working well what are you seeing on the ground, either at Foothill or at other community colleges in general, that when it comes to either the Career Center or workforce development and employers and students, are there any practices or behaviors or things that you're seeing that you're like, this actually isn't helpful? It's hindering our students from being able to find some of these opportunities. What might you call attention to?
I think a lot of our students are still coming to us with the hope that we're able to kind of spoon feed them internship opportunities or job opportunities that are just for our students, and they really like that. And so that's something we would like to do. And I'm adding it here in the not helpful part, because sometimes we don't get enough follow-up from employers and partners to create these pathways. We have seen an influx of new organizations trying to reach out to, I'll take Foothill for example, for our workforce development program, to start something new under the auspices of DEI, and community colleges are a great way to hit all your targets on that front, but the follow through is really poor, and that's not working. And that's something that I would like to call attention to, that we want our students to have the best opportunities, but we don't want to be flaked on either. So if there's any way, if there's any way to get that out there, we want to work with folks. We want to create those special pathways, but we would really appreciate a little more follow through, both with us as a department, but also for our students when they're applying to jobs and we push them out on these different networks and platforms. It's still astonishing to me, even from when I was looking for jobs back in the days where we used to mail things and then wait for responses. I almost can understand why employers might not get back to individual candidates in that time. But now in email era where most things are just done online, if students are not selected, let them know. Don't have them wait and think that they still have hope. That's something else that would be really awesome if more employers could adopt. Just let folks know either way so they can move on and keep the search going or pick from their best options.
Super helpful, super helpful. And no doubt most employers are using larger systems and may have a way to automate even the decline email and things like that, just to let folks kind of stay in the know. Robin, let's actually use this as a great segue to talk a little bit more about DEI. Maloney obviously mentioned that DEI is a hot topic for pretty much every employer out there. I don't think I've personally spoken to a single employer in the past year that has not had DEI as part of their focus or goals as they think about talent. And Maloney brings up a good point. That's unfortunately sometimes employers are just purely looking at recruitment and the numbers, and they're not necessarily thinking about the deeper meaning of what equity and inclusion really looks like for their organization. How do you then retain that great talent? And they're not really invested in building deeper relationships with some of the institutions and the students there. So in your role, I know that you are actually the DEI program manager at HCL. And so would love to hear a little bit more about how do you think about DEI and how do you work with community colleges to actually build strategy jointly and together?
So I'm the program manager facing campuses. So we have an overall strategy, but I can't think of an audience that is more engaged in DEI strategies than students. They definitely understand. It's just, the world has changed a lot. This is something that I've always done throughout my almost 30-year career now in talent, but it wasn't always a focus. It was something I sort of had to fight for at some point. And I'm so excited, first of all, that more focus and that we can see the value in that. So at HCL, our vision for that, it's an ongoing growth opportunity for us. I think initially it was for us to sort of balance in tech. We recognize that there's an imbalance in gender equality in tech. So that was a huge focus for us. And we've made some great strides. It continues to be growth. So, I'm driving our ERGs specifically, and I'm working expanding that into different markets globally too. Personally, I'm on the steering committee of our Pride organization as a vocal ally and a parent in that community. And I can't tell you how many students have come to me by just being a visual safe space for them to see that, they feel comfortable coming to me and then asking. My goal is that they can be their genuine selves. By being a woman in technology myself, by being, the daughter of a veteran. I think that you have to meet people where they are. So we had a big discussion about this last week, and actually I have an event today in ensuring that I've got a diverse panel of speakers, because if you can't see it, you can't be it. If representation matters, and understanding that, and just constantly driving that in all that we do on campus, working with my career centers and representatives and faculty to ensure that I am in touch with student organizations that will help drive those initiatives, meeting with the cultural centers at each of the campuses, identifying opportunities for particular events. If I can be a panelist, if I can help in any way, if we can support or sponsor, just getting that word across. One of the great things about DE&I initiatives is that the community as a whole across, it's not competitive. Everybody wants to do good. They want to do well, and they want to do better for those underserved communities. So if you're doing it well, it's not a dollar for dollar ROI. It's a long-term investment in your organization. And I could go on about this for about 4 days. So, but yeah, just a partnership and understanding. I often start that conversation by asking, tell me about your students. Who are they? And what's important to them, whether that be that it's a large population of first generation students, and do I need to create communication in dual language so that their families can feel that they're a part of the discussion. So there's a lot of different ways that we can do that.
I appreciate the thoughtfulness and sort of how you've approached this and what you're talking about. Lydia, sort of same question to you. Can you give an example of how DEI comes into play when you're thinking about recruiting talent for your organization?
Absolutely. So I think that in our industry, we have properties in 17 states. We have 300 communities nationwide. We have a very diverse resident base. So for us, obviously it is the right thing to do. It's a good business decision as well for residents to walk into our leasing office and feel connected with someone on a deeper level, and have someone in that office that has a similar background to them, looks like them, has shared similar experiences to them. So that's very important. At a more granular level for our tech schools or community colleges, let's say if there's a maintenance order at an apartment, if you're a resident and Spanish is your first language, and somebody walks in and they're speaking about HVAC in a language that is not your first language, and then somebody comes in and is able to share that information with you about your apartment home that you spend $2,500 a month on in your first language, that's very impactful in terms of creating that long-term and super meaningful relationship with the customer. So situations like that really inspire us and encourage us to continue with those DEI efforts and make that a forefront in terms of our recruiting efforts.
I love that. I love that. Thank you for that example. And I think it's certainly very true. I mean, I know I didn't grow up living in a rental unit, but we often would have to have folks come and help with some of the house things when things were not working, and both of my parents speak Chinese. And so if they had a handyman or found somebody that could sort of explain it to them in their native language, it certainly helped them feel more comfortable with, the price, what we were paying for, what was happening, and follow up in case something broke down again, or they needed to get more help. And so it's such a simple and easy explanation, but the reality is I think that would apply for any of us if we were to suddenly move abroad somewhere and needed help ourselves, right? And it's those little things, it's those daily things that actually really do make a big difference. So appreciate you sharing that. Now, Maloney, I know that building equitable services is obviously something that has always been top of mind for you. It's one of the reasons that I believe you chose to partner with Handshake early on. So what are some of those initiatives that you're working on, and how might those translate to other institutions that want to do more work in this area too?
That's definitely, you hit it on the head. One of the reasons we were so excited when Handshake decided to involve community colleges, because that was one of our cornerstones in making the job search process more equitable for everyone. It wasn't just for us about getting our students to be on the same field as, let's say, our four-year counterparts, but it was actually about getting them the same tools as well, so that they're able to know what they're going to be carrying with them for the next few years of their education a bit earlier, and get that start in, building their profiles and building a legacy of activity on certain platform ecosystems, such that recruiters and employers can take notice of them. So that was just one of the initiatives that we were really excited to bring to our students. We've also been working on really revitalizing some of what we are teaching in our coursework to make our students more competitive in this 21st century area, with things like digital branding and topics that a lot of us maybe didn't think about so explicitly in our youth, if you will. And, now that we have students who are digital natives, we really have to give them an idea or a space to think about how what they're putting out there is, going to be part of their brand going forward, that will then be something that employers could search. And if you don't align with that employer's brand or goal, maybe that's going to be something that's negative hit for you when you're searching for jobs. We're also focusing time on helping students not just search for the job, which is kind of Handshake's area of expertise, but the before steps, right? Like, if you don't know what you don't know, how are you going to even find the job title or the role that you're looking for in the platform? So we wanted to also take a couple step backs and really give students tools that will help them find the careers that they are best suited for based on personality and interest, not just course titles, right? So how do we take a student who might be in an English major but has great tech skills on the side and is really a community builder as a personality trait? How do we find them the best careers that are fit for that? So we've been developing a partnership with Gladio as well, and you've heard me mention them before, but I really think that's critical in terms of getting the students to then find the right kinds of jobs they want to apply for on Handshake. So that has been really instrumental in how we've been building our career service opportunities at Foothill. And I think I'll save my other couple of specific points for later on.
Perfect. That's super helpful, Maloney. Thank you. Thank you for sharing all of your expertise in that. I also want to make sure that I address Janine's point in here. Thank you so much for acknowledging the nomenclature around technical colleges and not schools, and that technical schools may actually carry a very different connotation or meaning for folks. And I certainly apologize. I know that I use schools often interchangeably for all of my universities and colleges. I use it often when I'm talking about 4 years as well, but we'll be much more careful when we're talking in the 2-year space to be sure that we're using the term college instead. So thank you so much for acknowledging that and for mentioning it in the chat. I think it's great knowledge for all of us to have. When we're thinking about elevating community colleges in the recruiting space, and we're starting to get some questions about this as well, so I'm excited to give you some of our audience questions as well. I'm curious, Lydia, maybe you could start us off. What are 1 or 2 things that community colleges can do to really elevate their students in today's competitive recruiting landscape? Are there different types of partnerships that they should be considering with employers? Are there certain types of career readiness workshops that you wish they were giving to help prep their students better? Should they be using Handshake in different ways? Like, what are 1 or 2 things that you think they should be focused on?
Sure. So I think that, specifically with Gen Z, younger millennials, we are seeing where, social media and Indeed and all of these job boards, we have to use them. So having those basic computer skills is pretty much a requirement to apply to positions and connect with companies. Again, we are seeing with the younger generations, that's just like now ingrained into them. It's not something that they have to learn anymore. But I think being mentally prepared to submit those applications, keep an eye on your email, confirm interviews, be comfortable with written and email communication. Again, I think is something that's really important. And I think just speaking kind of anecdotally myself, again, reminding students, like, what does choosing a career look like? Like, let's talk through more than just that hourly rate, because for us, we want to make a really long-term lasting hiring decision. And in order to do that, the candidate has to interview us just as much as we're interviewing them. So I think just continuing to empower the students to really take ownership of their job search and not just accept the first thing that comes to them, because it is super competitive. So the more research and information that they can get their hands on, that's going to help them make a really sound decision, which helps them, but it helps the employer as well, because we have a lasting associate.
Super helpful. Thank you, Lydia. Robin, how about you?
I'm so glad that you mentioned partnerships. So we would love to have the opportunity to do paid partnerships at our community college level. I know it's kind of non-standard, but we're doing that at our university level, but our demands honestly are smaller there. And so I know at Collin, we've had this discussion. I saw my Collin partners on the call. And so we're thinking outside of the box. But we would love to see this kind of become more standard at the community college level, because we want to have that opportunity to engage more at a higher level with students. I would say also, COVID has definitely changed things. I know, just like faculty and staff on campus, talent acquisition is just sort of known for running lean, right?
Mhm.
And so we're kind of doing not double work, but we're having to sort of to balance both virtual and in person now. And so when you're making those decisions, kind of think about that, and reach out to us and ask us what works best, because we're still trying to figure that out too. So this year we're doing both, and with the same teams, that we had before. So that's been a little challenging. So we want to engage with you and figure out what's the best way. We want to engage with them in the way that works best for them. We know that there's significant feedback that that virtual works best for some, but we want to work with our campus partners. We don't know the answers. We want to hear what the students say to you. Those are a couple things. For us, working on Handshake and switching to that platform was a complete game changer. It's the seamless process for us, and so when our community colleges are on that platform, I'm the administrator for it, so it makes my life a lot easier, honestly. And I can streamline our events there. So I love that, and I love what you said about including the information for curriculum. Now I'm managing a database of all of that for all of our campuses nationwide by just literally going on and researching it. That would be incredible.
That's awesome. Robin, let me actually stick with you for a second. Maloney, I promise I will give you a chance to answer this question as well. We got a great question from Brett, actually, that said, we're about to launch Handshake next month at City College of San Francisco. And I'm wondering how students will perceive their chances of getting jobs when they see other Bay Area powerhouse universities attracting big name employers with large numbers of jobs. And so curious, obviously, Robin, from the employer point of view, you probably recruit at a number of institutions in the Bay Area, for example. How do you think about that when you're looking at sort of community college talent versus four-year talent? Does one sort of hinder the other? Does it not? Do you look at those strategies very differently? And then, of course, Maloney, what has your experience been with your own students being on Handshake in this sort of question that I think Brett has raised, and I think is a good one to address? So Robin, you first.
So I told Brett, yay, I'm so excited that they're moving to the platform, because again, it's that seamless communication. I can share events that we're doing with Brett's students easily, invite them to them, and then communicate with the staff, follow the school, see their events easily. It just makes everything just so much more functional. I would say for us, our investment is we definitely work with both universities and community college, but one of the reasons that I chose HCL in a really competitive market, there were a number of different ways I could have gone. The reason I chose HCL is that they do understand that untapped potential within technical colleges, community colleges, and then again, investment even further into apprenticeships. I have felt for a very long time that is just a gap in the market that someone needed to capitalize on. So we absolutely work with universities, but really the majority of our demand right now is going to be towards community college students.
Fantastic. That's great. Maloney, what's your experience been like so far with your students on Handshake, and whether or not they've felt like they still had good chances even against potentially other bigger brand name universities in the area?
So from what I'm able to see on the reporting side of things, I know that companies that have never set foot on our campus are reaching out to our students, and those students who have been contacted would never have been able to engage with those companies. I'll use TikTok, for example. TikTok has been reaching out to our students, and I don't think we've ever had anyone reach out to us in person. But through the platform, I know that they're connecting. And it's up to the students to tell me if they did succeed in their job or interview outcomes. But at least I know that they're being elevated to the level where folks are looking at them, where before they didn't even have that shot. So I think there's space for all of us, and it isn't necessarily a competition in terms of like the branded schools versus the unbranded schools. We all hold unique talent, and it's just a matter of making sure that our talent gets showcased, whether it's in person, on Handshake, and just really telling employers what our students are good at and why they should come to us.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. I know that has certainly been true for some of our smaller, even four-year institutions, being able to get access and exposure to employers and to opportunities that otherwise they would not have been able to. And I think in large part for folks like Lydia and Robin, it just makes it a more seamless and easier experience from the employer end to be able to access everybody in one place and to be able to have everything kind of consolidated and more streamlined. So I'm pleased to hear, obviously from Maloney, your perspective that has also been true for your students. I think this actually leads into one of the other questions we got, which is a really great one. So how can community college students really stand out? How do they stay competitive engaging with employers on Handshake, particularly those that might be in a larger metro area like San Francisco, like LA? What's your advice? Lydia, why don't we start with you? What's your advice for how community college students can stay more competitive?
Sure. So I think for MAA, we target all different types of universities. We target four-year colleges, we target community colleges, technical colleges, and some of those candidates feed the same jobs, some of them don't. So it just kind of depends on that opportunity. Again, I think I would just go back to the candidate really doing their due diligence in terms of researching what they want out of a career. Communication follow-up is always super helpful, and just kind of add this in there in terms of following up with candidates. I know that was something that we talked about previously. Having this one centralized platform is incredibly helpful. For me personally, for my team, I support areas that I don't physically live in. So sometimes I can't always visit that community college. So having a platform where I can connect with them more easily has been super helpful. So I think in terms of staying competitive, doing your research on the company, really having a clear vision of what you want out of a career when you're a candidate, and really not settling. Again, I think there's such a value in those graduates, and it's such a competitive job market that the candidates and the graduates really hold. They're kind of in control in this situation. So by doing that research, choosing the right company for them, that's going to make us as the employer say, you know what, that person did their research. It seems like they're really going to stick. I really like that person, even if maybe they don't have the perfect background. a lot of companies are more so leaning towards those soft skills than the person with that perfect degree that's exactly relevant to the position.
Super helpful. Thank you. Robin, how about you? What would you say here?
I think Lydia hit a lot of the points. I agree with everything that she said. Additionally, I always advise students, if I'm giving kind of like a look behind the screen of what we do, is that, we have got access to other platforms, like for instance, LinkedIn Recruiter. So making sure that their LinkedIn is current, that it has a current resume, and that they're choosing that they're open to opportunities. So not a lot of people know that we have a completely separate platform. And then on Handshake, to follow those employers that you are interested in, to follow their social media, attend their events, really interview us as much as we're interviewing you. Connect with the people on the calls on LinkedIn too. When I leave an in-person event, I always have about 800 connections, which I love. And so, follow the people that are change makers and those subject matter experts, because they will be able to really give you insight. And then work with your campus teams, work with your career centers and your career coaches. They have those relationships as well. So oftentimes, if we've got a really specific need, we're going to call the campus offices if we need a really strong push. And if you've got a relationship with them, they're going to help push you through. That's a big deal too.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that I'm definitely hearing, very common theme across both what you and Lydia have talked about, is making sure that your students have an online presence. They need to have an online presence. They need to have an online brand. They need to be active, regularly checking email. Let's get real tactical here. When you message a student, how quickly do you want to hear back? Do you want to hear back within 24 hours, 48 hours, a week later? Like, what's the right, definitely not a week. Robin shook her head real fast. What's the time frame that we should be aiming for? We want to make sure that our students are not missing out on some of these great opportunities. What would you recommend?
I mean, I would love to hear, like, within 72 hours. We recognize that during certain times of the year, they may be in finals and things of that nature. So I'd love to hear back from them within 72 hours. It would be great if it's 24, but we recognize that sometimes that's not possible. Yeah, that's not always possible.
Super helpful.
You mentioned online presence. Lock your social down. Only have professional stuff.
Also helpful. Lydia, would you agree with 24 to 72 hours?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it kind of depends on the context of what the communication is. If they're just sharing that they, are interested in the position, okay, it's not as big of a rush. But if I'm like trying to confirm an interview that's like tomorrow, quicker follow-up is great.
Better. Absolutely. I mean, and honestly, I note some of these things because the reality is the student who responds faster sometimes is going to be the student that keeps moving forward, right? And so as you're helping to prepare your students, just keeping these small things in mind will certainly make a difference. And I know, Robin, one of the things you mentioned was following employers. So not only should you follow employers on social media in different places to see what the company's talking about, what they're posting about, what they're commenting on, you can also encourage students to follow them in Handshake so that when they post an event, they post a new job, our recommendation engine will also encourage students to sign up for one-on-one sessions and things like that when they know that a student has expressed an interest in an employer, so it can make their life a little bit easier in some of those ways. With the last 5 minutes, I'm going to ask you a quick question, Maloney. One of the things that seems really necessary based on what Lydia and Robin has talked about is obviously this active engagement and actually sort of being on top of this. So that being said, what have you found to be helpful in terms of student engagement on a platform like Handshake? Because I'm in my mind already thinking about how could we actually help more community colleges to activate more of their students, get them engaged in the platform using some of our sort of like email campaigns and segments in a way that some of the career centers may not have enough staff to really do your own campaigns. How could we actually help supplement some of that? So Maloney, curious to hear from this past year, what's really worked for you all? I think some of the new folks that might be implementing soon would be curious.
Definitely. I think when we were able to provide the feedback that, for example, our schools are on quarters, but the handshake system was only sending activation emails twice a year, matching semester schools. That was really helpful. That's like one concrete thing that was useful because students like the draw emails. They like the emails with the gift certificates for activation or survey completion. Like those are the ones that get hit, right? Because on our end, we can do all of the student outreach. We can tell them to activate, like we already have it for you. All you have to do is go in once. But then when they keep getting the reminders with this job has been posted specifically for your school, and hey, you're going to miss out if you don't get activated. Having some of those things automated for the students who are not activated would be really helpful because to your point, you know, at our school, I'm the handshake person and I'm doing all of the back-endy things. And that's just one person for all of our 18K students, right? 18K plus. And that's something that would be really useful because if we can't get them on, that's the first step, right? If we don't get them into the ecosystem, no matter how good the ecosystem is, we're missing out entirely.
That's right. That's right. Well, that's helpful. I'll definitely take that back to the team because I think we can absolutely help sort of essentially take over student activation for our partners and get that out. I mean, we have an email team and we have folks that can get that on a more regular cadence. And to your point, let's actually get them into the ecosystem so they can meet folks like Lydia and Robin and not miss out on some of these opportunities.
I was just going to say,
yeah, go ahead.
It's fundamental to us that they should be there, but sometimes they need that carrot, like they need a reason to turn themselves on. So
yeah. I think that's exactly right. That's exactly right. Well, I want to be really cognizant of time. So if there is one last thing that you would recommend to everybody that is on the line, if there's one thing that you encourage them to do after listening to your webinar today and listening to your words of wisdom, what would it be? Maloney, we're going to start with you, kind of a little fire round. What's one thing that you would encourage folks to do today?
Create elevated boutique experiences for your students so that they can feel pride in the fact that they're getting this thing because they're part of your school. So teach them about how they can be better relationship builders through specific things like micro mentoring or spring internship, micro internship kind of things. And you can always connect with me to learn more about that.
Perfect. Thank you. Robin, how about you?
If you're not currently on the platform, to strongly consider it. It gives us such a great opportunity to engage with students.
Thanks, Robin. Lydia.
Sure. So I think on every talent acquisition team across the globe, you know, social recruiting is pretty much a top priority, if not, you know, the only priority. So I would just recommend, you know, to get ahead of that curve, be, you know, the first community college in your area, the first technical college in your area to utilize a platform like Handshake so that you are not lagging behind. Handshake has gone, you know, above and beyond for us to make this whole program make sense for us and work for our company. So I'm sure, you know, very similar experience on the end of the university.
Oh, thank you so much. Sure. It is truly a pleasure to partner with all of you. Thank you to all of you who stayed with us the whole hour. We're so excited that you could hear from these lovely ladies and all of their great expertise and experience. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to any of us. I'm sure we are all thrilled to have connections with you on LinkedIn and other places. And I hope you all have a wonderful Wednesday.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.